Hi, my name is Luz Silva, and I'm a postdoc at the University of Antwerp. What I have for you today is a paper that developed out of my doctoral thesis that I completed last summer at UCL. And it's about the epistemic role of a particular group or class of emotions that has been called outlaw emotions. So these are any emotion that occurs under conditions of oppression and that goes against prevailing ideology. So this work stems from a kind of dissatisfaction that I have with how little contemporary philosophy of emotion has interacted with and imported insights from feminist philosophy. And this is a dissatisfaction that guides at least one branch of my research. In the case at hand, what I think is going on is that the epistemic roles typically postulated of emotions in general in the contemporary literature actually fail to accommodate or account for these outlaw emotion cases that occur under conditions of oppression, which we have reason to think are really epistemically important. So what I'm going to argue today is that there are these typical ways of thinking about how emotions play epistemic roles, and we typically would think, or the literature has assumed, that they can easily be applied to outlaw emotion cases, and I'm going to argue against this and suggest that they actually risk ruling outlaw emotion cases out as epistemically fruitful, and that we're actually left with a lack of an adequate account for the epistemic role of outlaw emotions. So what are outlaw emotions? As initially coined in Jagger's seminal piece, Alison Jagger wrote that outlaw emotions are distinguished by their incompatibility with dominant perceptions and values. So a common example would be a 1950s housewife who is happy and content and believes she is naturally suited to that lifestyle, yet at the same time experiences bouts of sadness, anger, and frustration. These emotions, the negative ones, would be considered outlaw emotions because they go against the prevailing norms in which she lives and which she has internalized, namely that she should be a housewife and that she's naturally suited to that lifestyle. So having outlaw emotions isn't an ideal epistemic situation to be in. It can be disorientating for the agent. The housewife could think that there's something wrong personally with her for experiencing these emotions. Why isn't she content with the lifestyle she believes she should be content with? So it can result in misunderstanding and confusion. But there's an upside to outlaw emotions, which feminist philosophers have labored to drive home, which is that they are the seeds or the guides to really important, potentially radical epistemic insight, as they can be guides to knowledge about oppression and injustices that the agent would have otherwise lacked. So they're really important. And obviously we want to have an account of the epistemic role of emotions that is going to be able to vindicate that role. So I characterize outlaw emotions as rationally recalcitrant emotions. They're rational because they're getting something right, and they're recalcitrant because they conflict with other oppressive beliefs, that the agent has. So typically in the contemporary emotion literature, when recalcitrant emotions are discussed, the emotion tends to be the feature of the agent's mental life that's getting things wrong. It's the belief that's getting things right. So here we have a case where, although there are many others, but here we have a case where the emotions are actually the feature of the agent's mental life that is more adequately tracking how things really are. So here's an example that's more contemporary that will guide us throughout this short presentation. So Raquel is a woman living under conditions of gender oppression who is on a night out with a group of girlfriends. Let's assume the concept of sexual harassment is not available in Raquel's society. Raquel feels someone squeeze part of her body and turns to see a man she has never met before. The man smiles at Raquel and walks away. Some of Raquel's friends feel excited by what just happened and encourage her to go talk to the man. Others aren't excited but jealous for not having been the one squeezed. Raquel believes she should be flattered by the attention she received, as well as proud to have been the one approached. And indeed, she does feel a mixture of these emotions. But she also feels uneasy and angry. Raquel forms the belief that what the man did was not okay based on her anger, despite it going against her wider set of beliefs and emotional responses, as well as those of her peers. So what we have here is an outlaw emotion of anger that is going against Raquel's other emotional dispositions, emotions, as well as internalized beliefs. And it's getting something right about the situation because it's tracking that what the man did was not okay. She was being sexually harassed. And this is a clear example of the emotion perhaps tracking something that Raquel wouldn't have had access to had she not experienced the outlaw emotion. So what could be, how could we account for the epistemic role we want to grant that this emotion might be playing? So there are two ways of thinking about the epistemic role of emotions dominant in the literature, in the contemporary literature. One is a motivational role. So a motivational view would take emotions to motivate search for their reasons. The idea is that emotions motivate inquiry, such that the reasons for why you're experiencing emotions are uncovered. So in Raquel's case, her anger could cause her to question why she is experiencing this emotion that's so perhaps unexpected or different from her friends. And this could lead her to learn new things about what she values and why she values things, and learn that what the man did was not okay. On a normative view, which doesn't deny this motivational role, emotions also play a much more direct normative role in that they provide immediate defeasible justification for evaluative beliefs based on them. On a normative view, Raquel's anger doesn't just motivate her to inquire as to why she's experiencing her outlaw emotion. The anger actually, by virtue of being experienced, allows Raquel to apprehend the world in a distinct way. So by virtue of becoming angry, Raquel is seeing the man's actions as bad. She's seeing the man's actions in a certain light that is different from how her friends are seeing the man's actions. And in that sense, emotions are thought to behave similarly to perceptual experiences and to provide this immediate justification to evaluative beliefs based on them. So on the normative view, the belief that Raquel forms that what the man did was not okay is just immediately prima facie justified by taking her anger at face value. Just by the anger, you don't need to engage in any reasoning or reflection or inquiry. Whereas on the motivational view, that belief that what the man did is not okay is only going to be justified by potential reasons or considerations that an anger-triggered inquiry would uncover. So the normative view is less demanding in a sense because it doesn't require the agent to reason or reflect. So these two views are foreshadowed actually in Jagger's initial piece as roles that outlaw emotions in particular play. And they're often, perhaps not often, but have been assumed to be applicable to outlaw emotion cases and to be able to account for their epistemic roles. So what I'm going to argue is that it's actually much harder to see how they succeed in doing so, such that I think the epistemic role of outlaw emotions is currently under-theorized. So let's briefly look at some problems with the motivational view. So I think the motivational role of emotions, the epistemic motivational role of emotions, is extremely important. We can come to learn things about ourselves and what we value, as well as what others value and what is valuable, through critically assessing why we have certain emotional responses or following an emotion-triggered inquiry. I think that it's really important. I just think it's not going to give a full account of the epistemic role of outlaw emotions, or emotions in general, for that matter. But in outlaw emotion cases, there are some particular worries, which are that the emotion-triggered inquiry in outlaw emotion cases, we have reason to think, is particularly compromised and demanding. It's compromised because the agent has internalized a wide range of oppressive beliefs, such that when they engage in inquiry, they are likely to be biased towards confirming the oppressive beliefs they already believe, rather than siding with this outlaw emotion that they have very little independent reason to follow, essentially. For similar reasons, this inquiry in outlaw emotion cases is also overly demanding, because to overcome these biases in reasoning that would probably favor the oppressive beliefs over the emotion, the agent is unlikely to be able to overcome them on her own or by herself. So she would probably perhaps require more time, input from other agents. And I think this is important, that there would be probably a social component that would need to be added to make the motivational view more plausible, as the nature of the inquiry envisioned by the motivational view, I think, is usually seen as quite individualistic. And one might think Raquel would benefit from interaction with similarly situated agents, people that have gone through similar occasions of sexual harassment, to understand why what the reasons for their anger are. So the inquiry is both compromised and demanding. But even if we could overcome these worries and the motivational view could be amended accordingly, I think that the motivational view would still find it hard to deliver on the intuition that Haeckel's belief is justified. Haeckel's belief that what the man did was not okay is justified when she has it at the club, when she's sexually harassed. Because, as I mentioned, the motivational view will cash out the justification of that belief by highlighting the potential fruits of this emotion-triggered inquiry as those things that provide justification to this belief. So it's only once Haeckel has reflected and uncovered the reasons for her anger that those reasons that she finds can play justificatory roles. Until then, if and when that happens, the belief is not itself justified. So this is where the normative view comes in as seeming like an ideal match, because you don't need to reason, you just need to have the emotion, and you get immediate justification for that belief that what the man did was not okay. This is great. The emotion can be taken at face value. It's not cognitively demanding, which we might think is really positive for when what we care about is outlaw emotion cases, where the emotion may be literally all that the agent has at their disposal to form the belief. So the normative view seems really adequately suited to account for outlaw emotion cases. And indeed, it has been proposed by proponents of the view to be ideally suited to account for outlaw emotion cases, because it can deliver on this intuition that Haeckel's belief that what the man did was not okay is justified without requiring her to be aware of her reasons or be able to reflect about why her belief is justified. So I'm going to argue that this is merely a parent perfect match, because there's a worry that because the normative view is about defeasible justification, we have the worry that actually in outlaw emotion cases, there are always rebutting defeaters. So in this diagram, you can see that we have on the one hand a belief based on the outlaw emotion of anger, and on the other we have the belief that, there will be many beliefs that this emotion stands in tension with, but there's most likely a belief that outright conflicts or contradicts with the emotion-based belief. So she believes, as we saw in the example, that what the man did was indeed okay. So we need a reason for why this belief doesn't just defeat the belief based on the emotion, right? Because the oppressive conflicting belief is a potential rebutting defeater that would mean that in all outlaw emotion cases, the beliefs based on outlaw emotions are subject to defeat because of the presence of the conflicting beliefs that make them outlaw emotions to begin with. So it seems to be a structural feature of these cases that they have rebutting defeaters. So this is the worry. And the clear move, I think, is to deny that these cases involve real defeaters and to claim that actually there's no defeat here, it's only merely apparent, perhaps because the oppressive conflicting beliefs are not actually defeaters because they're not justified. So they lack some epistemic standing that they would need to qualify as bona fide defeaters. So the move in response to my worry would be to say that outlaw emotion cases don't involve defeaters because defeaters must be justified. So the move is to try to say the outlaw emotion cases don't involve defeaters, they're not justified, therefore the normative view works and emotions provide justification to the beliefs based on them. So there are two versions that I can make out of this sort of move. One would be more aligned with an internalist view of justification, and the other more in line with an externalist view of justification. And I'm briefly going to highlight why it's not such an easy move to make, in my opinion. So an internalist move would say the oppressive belief that what the man did is okay can't act as a defeater against the justification of the belief based on the outlaw emotion of anger, because it's not internally justified. And typically one might postulate a counterfactual condition to cash out internalist justification and say that the oppressive belief is not justified because it wouldn't have survived reflection or scrutiny from the agent. So that's a counterfactual on if the agent had had time to reflect, they would have realized that belief is not a good one to hold, and so a belief that has that feature can't act as a defeater. The worry with this move is that it assumes that oppressive beliefs are ones that the agent herself stands in a position to undermine. As I mentioned earlier, this is problematic as it risks misconstruing outlaw emotion cases, or at least severely restricting the cases in which this counterfactual will apply, because or restricting the cases in which the emotions can play, outlaw emotions can play their justificatory roles to those cases where this counterfactual can apply. Because we might have reason to think that it's much harder for agents to, by themselves, individualistically, without some social component, and saying more about how strong this counterfactual condition would have to be for the agent to themselves undermine these oppressive beliefs. It also, I just want to mention, assumes that oppressive beliefs are ones that would in fact be undermined in this counterfactual scenario. And this is not entirely clear. So recall the housewife. This internalist move assumes that her belief that it's good to be a housewife, or that she wants to be a housewife, or beliefs of this sort could be easily undermined or would be undermined by critical feminist reflection. But this simply isn't the case. One could still believe in the value of being a housewife, or desire to be a housewife, or think that one personally is suited to be a housewife, despite being subjecting this belief to intense scrutiny and even feminist scrutiny. So one would endorse that belief perhaps for different reasons, but to claim that those beliefs, oppressive beliefs, what count as oppressive beliefs in outlaw emotion cases would necessarily be undermined by critical reflection is not so easy to push, I think. So an externalist move, so before I say why the externalist move seems more promising, this is just to illustrate that the oppressive conflicting belief seems to still stand as a potential defeater, because the internalist move doesn't seem to work. So the externalist move seems more promising because we might think that from the agent's personal point of view, subjective point of view, the oppressive belief is going to come out as justified. So we might think that a view of justification that makes reference to things beyond the individual, perhaps the structural features, is going to do a better job at denying that the conflicting belief in outlaw emotion cases is justified. So an externalist move would say something like that the agent in outlaw emotion cases is systematically out of touch with truths relevant to a given domain. So Raquel is just not a reliable knower about gender relations and the value of the relative genders. She doesn't reliably form true beliefs regarding this domain, and therefore the belief that what the man did is okay is not justified, because it is a belief that's part of that set. So a problem with this sort of move is that it neglects that oppressive beliefs can be self-fulfilling. So this is a point that's been made in feminist philosophy by various people. So for example, Haslanger writes that under conditions of male dominance, women are in fact more submissive than men. This is a true generalization, and those who live under male dominance are justified in believing it. Langton similarly writes that when oppression is systematic enough, there's nothing accidental about a correlation between beliefs that women are servile and women's servility. And the connection between beliefs and the truth of those beliefs can be as reliable as one could wish. So here we have the idea that so oppressive beliefs can be self-fulfilling. That's a disturbing feature of epistemic life under oppression. So if that's the case, then there are many oppressive beliefs that come out as true, and true as well as justified. So what this means is that we have reason to doubt that an externalist move is going to manage to undermine the justification of Raquel's belief that what the man did was okay. This is because even if that belief isn't true, which we might rightfully want to deny, it's hard to see how the belief couldn't come out as justified, seeing as so many other oppressive beliefs come out as justified and true. It seems that Raquel is a reliable knower with respect to those beliefs, and they are about the domain under which she is oppressed. So they're about gender relations, etc. So if she can form true and justified beliefs within this domain, then although this belief is false, the one that what the man did was okay, it might still come out as justified. So we have a way of doubting that the externalist justification move is going to work to block my worry about outlaw emotion cases always involving defeaters, which was a worry about the normative view being an adequate way of cashing out the really important epistemic role that we want to grant outlaw emotions. So the conclusion is the dominant ways of thinking about the epistemic role of emotions in the literature actually risk ruling such cases out as epistemically fruitful, or alternatively, charitably, they drastically restrict those cases in which, those outlaw emotion cases in which we're going to be able to see strong epistemic roles and vindicate these strong epistemic roles that these emotions are playing. I don't have time to go into my positive proposal, but I think that we're now better placed to develop a viable account, and I hope I've at least drawn attention to this classes of emotions as being really interesting, and I think we can learn lessons about how the epistemic role of emotions in general should be thought about by focusing on these cases as well. Thank you so much for listening, and contact me here with any thoughts or comments.